Welcome back to the Kingdom of Pod, a post-Boise State win over Air Force, a FUGLY win on many levels, but nonetheless a victory 19-14. I love to go back and take a look at what I thought or anybody thought that writes about Boise State or talks about it on what was going to happen before the game. And, you know, I'm no exclusion to that. And I thought before the game that Boise State would be the more motivated team. You know, I think that we get carried away with that sometimes. It's hard to understand that. Is that why Air Force was 3 and outs and all those turnovers to start the game? Is that why Boise State played with their hair on fire? It has to have something to do with it. So I would say that Boise State played like they had something to defend. And that's their chances at winning a Mountain West championship and the honor of how they feel about their coach, their staff, and their teammates. And I think that came through. I'm not saying Air Force doesn't feel that way. I just thought that, you know, that was stifling defense. It reminded me a lot. You go back and remember the 2017 game with Boise State and San Diego State in San Diego. It was Hall of Fame night, Marshall Faulk's there, all these legends, a huge crowd, which they didn't normally get. It was in the old Murph. And they had Rashad Penny and others that could run the ball. I think Juwan Washington, I looked, was the backup. And Boise State's run defense had issues, and they stuffed them. Leighton Vander Esch and the rest of them was a great effort. And I think they ended up like 21-0 at some point and then continued to do well. Anyway, it did remind me of that. I thought Air Force would lull Boise State to sleep with a run game and then throw some bombs. They were averaging, 7 passing attempts coming into this game. They ended up throwing the football 8 times. They were averaging 21 yards per completion. They came out of it with 24 yards per completion, but they had no touchdowns. So they did limit, the bigger plays per se, but I didn't think that it won the game for Air Force. That much we can see quite clearly. So I'm going to give that to Boise State doing their job in that particular instance. I thought Boise State had to run the ball a lot better than they did because my estimation was this team is not ready to throw the football that much. Well, good thing I'm not in charge. Dirk Cutter saw and sees it much differently than that. I should have expected more of this after a 2-week break, that they could have installed some play concepts that, frankly, given where Taylon Green is at, throwing the football off his back foot, off balance, he throws it better on the run than he does in the pocket, shying away from getting hit. He looks very uncomfortable, and he still went 16 of 24 for 200 yards. Ugly at times, but effective, because I think this kid is just looking at a guy like Dirk Cutter and go, whatever you say, I'm going to do that. And I think every other player on that offense is doing that. I'm not saying the defense doesn't do it for Spencer Danielson. I'm saying you got a very unique situation on your hands at Boise State when you have somebody of Dirk Cutter's caliber, a former head coach of the NFL, calling the plays, telling these guys this will work. It's powerful. Think of your own career and what you do for a living. When managers talk to you, this will work, or consultants or whoever, and you go, okay, I'm going to trust you for my income and my family and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to do it, and it works. It's very powerful with what they have going offensively. So they didn't run the ball that well. They had to get more than 128 yards because that's what Air Force allows. They only gained 115, but come on. No Genti, no Halani. That was difficult. Boise State won the time of possession. Who would have thought that? I thought they had to limit it, not let Air Force just completely keep the ball the whole game, but they didn't. Boise State won the time of possession thanks to the defense and a very opportunistic offense. A 13-play drive, 11-play drive. And in the third quarter, Boise State had a 5-play drive that was 5 minutes and 30 seconds. So hand it to them. Tremendous efforts. I thought another angle going into the game was, hey, Air Force has lost 2 games in the Mountain West Conference to Wyoming and Utah State. How did Wyoming and Utah State do it? And can Boise State duplicate that effort? And so I looked at the stats about Wyoming and Utah State, and, they didn't run the ball as well as Wyoming or Utah State, Boise State. They didn't get the number of first downs that Wyoming or Utah State got. They only got 16. So everything was a less than, and yet they still beat Air Force. How? They threw the ball 24 times. They completed 16 of them. And, 13 yards per completion practically is what Boise State had in that game. That's in the upper third of FBS football. That is a good accomplishment. Hats off to Green, the receivers, the offensive line protection, Cutter for coming up with these schemes, and the rest of the coaches. How close did they come to losing this football game? Air Force had an 11-play, 82-yard drive, 9 minutes to go in this game, 9:15 or whatever, and it's a 5-point game. And that was the Air Force we all feared, right, at that point in the game. And Boise State gets the ball back, goes 3 and out. Farah, I don't know if he couldn't hear right, if he thought the snap was going to be a lot earlier than it was. But that happens, and they go 3 and out and give the ball back to Air Force. And then you had the 2 number 7s penalty to keep that drive going. And I'm going to credit coaches for scheming up Air Force's pass plays and the kids studying it and trusting what they'd learned and remembering it in the moment. Because I think it was Noah that said they only had so many pass plays coming in. They'd used X amount of them. So we felt like we had their number, and it came true. So again, great coaching, trust and belief. And you hear Andy selling that and in the post game a lot. Well, anymore, Andy and the head coaches, they're communicating to the team through the media. And they're doing everything in their power to show the players that they care about them and they're the reason everything works and everything is dependent on them and they're there to help them full time. And the reason you hear all that stuff, and I know this is a little bit of a tangent, the transfer portal's changed everything. And you better communicate to those players how important they are to you and your program constantly. That's called recruiting. So that's just the way that goes. But anyway, I thought that it was close. Air Force started horribly, right? Turnovers, 3 and outs, a horrible start. Boise State gets field goals, keeps them in the game. And without that holding penny on Matlock, which I think Matlock deserved to be held because he would have disrupted the play down near the goal line at the end of it. Air Force could have won the game maybe. I mean, they had plenty of chances to go ahead late and put Boise State into a situation where they had to throw to beat Air Force. So, yeah, it was a fugly game. Air Force certainly played ugly. Even Taylor Green's completions can at times be ugly, but the scheme is there. Sometimes they're just so wide open, even if you have poor technique, you can get it there. He reminds me so much of where Colin Kaepernick began. And, Cutter can only do so much at this stage of where he is with this offense. And it'll have to be some offseason work for Taylor Green to get a different throwing motion, to step into his throws, to become more of a pocket passer, and be able to see the field without getting distracted. But forget all that. They live on. Boise State wins the game in fugly fashion. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you. I'm trying to talk to you a little earlier next week on the Colorado State game so that everybody gets a chance to listen to it. Thanks for joining me here on the Kingdom of Pod.